Well, if you've been here for the last few weeks, you would know that we're in a series. And the series is a look at a book that I wrote called Who's Pushing Your Buttons? Dealing with the Difficult People in Your Life. And that's kind of one of those things that I've never had anybody have a blank in their face when I say, have you ever had a button pusher? Yes, I have. I have had somebody say, what in the world is that? And I found out they were a button pusher, and that was why they had no idea. For everybody else, everybody's got somebody in their life that they kind of, oh, yeah, or, yeah, in fact, I have a collection. I'm selling them on eBay right now. I have a pretty good stable of those people. Or there's one person that really drives me crazy. And so we've been going over the various aspects of why people are that way in previous sessions, that there are three things that kind of define a button pusher. One of those is they have issues in life that cause you issues in life, right? They do some crazy-making things that they just can't contain in their own crazy-making sphere. Their craziness comes over and contaminates your life in your bubble, and all of a sudden you become crazy in reaction to their craziness. Second thing is that they have a low sense of ownership or accountability or awareness or concern about the issues. It tends to be you're overreacting, or it's somebody else, or it's never me, or it's the environment, or the greenhouse effect, or it's toxic waste, or it's the Martians. It's just not me. So when you talk about fixing the problem, they don't have a lot of investment in fixing the problem. They have a lot of investment in like doing what they're doing. So not only do you have somebody that has an issue that affects you, you have somebody that doesn't really give a rip about whether the issue affects you or not. And then thirdly, it's a person that you have some level of meaningful emotional investment in. You're with them. You're like part of life with them. You're either married to them or dating them, or you're in family with them, or you're someone that there's someone that you can't get away from because the strands and the weavings of relationship mean you just can't cut and run and move to the next person. And we talked for a couple of weeks on why you do that and why you the things you do that don't work. And we've been talking now about more positive aspects, the resources you have and the things you can do. And tonight we're going to talk about two of those resources. And the first one is it's a strange word, but I'll explain it. It's your stance. Your stance. The overall position you take with your button pusher, and how there's a certain stance you can take that no matter what they do or say, you come from that stance. See, a lot of people, when they come to me and ask about a difficult person in their life, they'll say, okay, now when he says he's mad, what do I say? I'll say, well, you say, let me hear more of it. Okay, let me hear more of it or them. I say, well, come from a stance, because I could give you, and I think it's important, I could give people a million, like, say this and say that, like in Henry and my book, Boundaries Face to Face. We actually script out conversations. But there comes a point where memorizing a bunch of conversations is not going to work, because your crazy maker is going to be more creative than you. They're going to do an end run around you. You're going to think it's a dead ahead, forward offensive play, and they're going to come around you, and you're going to be in the mud. So at some point, you've got to think, they just said something I wasn't expecting. And you can't go, hold on a second. Well, you are too. I mean, you've got to come from a stance, which is an orientation to that person. And the second thing we're going to talk about is not only your stance, but there are words and ways you can use words that will really, really, really help. So, hopefully by the time we finish, all your button pusher problems will be fixed. The person will come to you on their knees, repenting in ashes, saying, forgive me, tell me how to live. I am a screw-up. And you can get a refund at the door if you think that'll happen tonight. But we have seen changes, and lots of changes. And I want to start in the section about your stance with a little story I tell in the book about somebody that had a stance that wasn't working. And you may be able to relate to this, because this has to do with, like, why we do lots of crazy things. Scott was talking to me about his 22-year-old daughter, Kim. she was like out of control. She was on a druggie. She was drinking, in and out of jobs all the time, and like would be in an apartment and then have a bad problem and call Scott, her dad, and his wife Mary, and say, "Can I move back in?" And they'd move back. It was one of those chaotic things. Like you hope that at 22 or 23, a person's gone by then. Sometimes very far away, gone. She wasn't gone, and she wasn't there. And he came. He says, "What do I do?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He says, "Well, you know, she's just chaos." I said, "She is chaos, and you are too." And he didn't like that. He said, "Well, what do you mean I'm chaos?" I said, I know that she's drinking. I know that she's on drugs. I know that she's not grown up inside. And she moves in and out. She has a million boyfriends, and she runs out of money. Let me tell you what you're doing in your own chaos towards her. He goes, "What?" I said, "Well, she gets in trouble. You know, her boyfriend and she fight, and then she's out of her apartment. Or she loses her job. So you feel sorry for her, and then you give her some money, and you give her a room, or you pay for her rent, you and Mary. And then she makes you mad because she keeps using it. So you yank it and you say, I'm going to disown you. That's like the next day. Then you go into her apartment and you raid her apartment for contraband because you're a concerned parent. And then you don't speak to her for a few months because you're so hurt and so mad. And then she's in jail and you bail her out of jail. Now, were I to be the most unstable person that it seems like she is, you would make me more unstable than I really am. And he and Mary got it, like, so we don't have a game plan. I said, no, you don't have a game plan. You know what they were doing? They were reacting. So however unstable your button pusher is, if you know nothing but react, now you've got two unstable people when one person needs to be the anchor. And so Scott and Mary put their heads together, and we did a lot of work, and they finally had an overall position to take. But that's what I mean by a stance. He had no stance. His orientation, well, that's what a stance is. It's an orientation or a point of view. His stance, well, let me ask you, who was in charge of his stance? His daughter was in charge of his stance. So the crazy person teaches you how to teach the crazy person. You know, it's like they say the inmates are running the prison. So let's talk a little bit about what the best and healthiest and most effective stance is and what you can do about that. And if you're watching this on DVD, Southern California has been blessed with rain for the last 2 years every day now. And I had to keep my notes in my pocket because I didn't have an umbrella, and they're fairly dry. So your stance is a guiding and orienting approach. In other words, it's the way you look at someone. The Bible talks about it in terms of God's stance towards us, for example, that God has an unchanging stance towards us. He does different things with us, but He doesn't change His overall stance towards us. Here's how God's position or orientation is with us. He says, David says, I'll declare, God, that your love stands firm forever and that you have established your faithfulness in heaven. That God's orientation towards us is one where He is faithful. He's going to do what He says He does. He is on our side. And that's the basic idea of our stance, is your stance needs to be even, and this is going to be kind of hard, but you really can't go anywhere with your button pusher unless you have this stance. You're for that person. You are for that person. You are on their side. That no matter what they're doing, if they're being unloving or self-centered or irresponsible or whatever, that instead of reacting to them like Scott was to his daughter, you're on their side because you want their best, and you know that their best is to grow up. That even though you feel like giving up, or you feel like getting revenge, or you feel like saying, well, you are too, why don't you, grow up too, and I'll tell Mom, and all those mature things we do. Your stance has got to be, I am part of the growth system for you. I want your best. Which is not easy to do because by nature, what we want to do is control them, fix them, beat them up, or whatever. And that will never work. So you're going to have to kind of clear your head out and say, I'm on this person's side and on their team. Now, what does that mean? It means that to be for somebody, you've got to have, I think, enough grace to give them. Grace being the fuel that we all need. All of us need grace. All of us need to know that nobody's going to condemn us or judge us or hold forgiveness away from us. That we all need to have, the love and support that's available. Now, if you've been with a button pusher at any time, I always have to hasten to add here, you may not be able to be very vulnerable with your button pusher right now, or very open, or, very intimate, because there might be a hurtful thing going on. But you can really give grace to somebody that you're not very intimate with. You can really give grace to somebody that you're not really vulnerable with. You can, in other words, you need to love somebody without needing them sometimes. Need is only reserved for those who have proved themselves to you. Need is only reserved for those that have shown that their character is such that they will take care of your fragility, and they will love you, and they'll be steady, and they'll be faithful, and they'll be caring. Need is something that you have to see is over time a person qualifies for. Love and grace and support, everybody gets that. So make a distinction between needing your button pusher and loving your button pusher. The other part of this stance, the second part of this, besides being loving and caring with them, is that you also need to be truthful with them, to be honest with them. Because most button pushers that I've noticed that never change either had a context or relationships where everybody gave up on them and everybody sort of like wrote them off, or nobody told them the truth. They had a bunch of really nice, sweet, codependent, kind of fearful people around them, and nobody ever got in their face and said, you're really screwing up. You're ruining things. So be willing to give them the truth. I was watching last few days ago an interview with Pat Summerall. You might have seen it on HBO, the great NFL and golf sportscaster. And he has a well documented history where he was an alcoholic for a long time and ruined everything in his life. And he talked about that. And he said 10 years ago, he had a really bad alcoholic episode. And he went home, and his best friends got in a circle around him, big sports figures and family members and people he really cared about. And they got in a circle around him. And we call that, anybody know what we call that? We call that an intervention. And so I was kind of fascinated watching the response of a person, not who was doing the intervening, but somebody from, like the inside out. And he said, I had to sit there and listen to all these people who had written out in longhand the truth of what they felt about me and how my drinking had affected them. And that wasn't even like, an email. When you write something in longhand these days, it really counts. And they all had these, things they had written to make it personal, let them see how much it mattered. And so the interviewer said, I think it was Brian Gumbel, the interviewer said, so what affected you the most? Was it this political figure or this sportscaster or this sports figure? He said, no, it's my daughter. Of all the things that really got me is my daughter. He said, what she said was, I'm ashamed to have your last name. And you could see in Summerall's face that 10 years later, it's still deeply, deeply moved and affected him. And then he goes on to, he talks about, he didn't fight it when they finally said, okay, I'm waving the white flag. I give because the truth had finally penetrated. That's what happens with a person in denial. You don't always need an intervention on your button pusher, but there needs to be intervention, if not a formal intervention. You know what I mean? And so he kind of waved the white flag and said, what do I do? And they said, we want you to go to Betty Ford. And he said, okay. And he says, it's a 28-day stay there, but I stayed 33. The interviewer said, why? He said, because I was so mad the first 5. That apparently that kind of entitlement and nobody should tell me what to do, that they had to just beat up the anger for 5 days to be mushy enough to get what was really broken in and fixed. Which I thought was really, that's kind of the way it goes. Point is, be aware and be prepared to give your button pusher the truth, not only in what you're going to say, which we're going to deal with in a few minutes, but also in just how you are. That what they need to know is that you say what you mean and you mean what you say. Scott was not doing that with his daughter. He would say, I'm going to go search your apartment, and then, he'd be the dictator, and then he'd bail her out when he felt bad for her. What was he teaching her? What was he saying to her? He was saying, stay as impulsive as you like. Don't ever integrate your parts. Don't ever, get your fragmentation of your personality together, because she was a fragmented person. Because whatever end of it you're on, I'm going to be there. When your button pusher needs the most positive and loving and at the same time strict and honest person possible, that's what you need to be if you want to be a force for healing and for integration of your button pusher. Now, let's talk a little bit about what that doesn't mean, because a lot of us who have been raised to be, terminally nice. Some of you can say that is my life script right there. If you've been raised to be terminally nice, you're going to have a tendency to have some misconceptions about a stance of grace and truth and being for. Being for someone does not mean agreeing with that person. Being for someone does not mean whatever they say, you're saying, yeah, you're right about that. For example, one of the things that button pushers do is when you show them, your attitude's a problem, a lot of them say, well, it's your fault. And it's easy to do. They're kind of like the Teflon defense. They just bounce it right back at you. And terminally nice people will go, you're right. I'm sorry, I'll get better. I've been going to 18 groups a week, and I'll go to 19. And I've read 20 books on people like you. I'll read 25. And they just kind of melt because they're terminally nice. They don't know that you don't have to agree. In fact, you'd better not agree with those things that can't be agreed with. And let me give you a little tip. For those of you who are terminally nice and you don't know whether to preach at somebody or always agree, sometimes, and this is really, really technical, sometimes you can shut up. Just shut up. They say something like wacko, like, no, everything's fine. And your first tendency is to go, well, yeah, at one level it is fine. On a metaphysical level, God is in charge. I can see what you mean, even though you have a machete in your hands right now. It's, kind of the crazy agreement so that they'll like you. And the other one's to say, no, it's not fine. I told you it wasn't fine 10 minutes ago. I'm going to tell you it's not fine. Get really adversarial. Shut up sometimes. Breath of fresh air. Your job is not to correct every crazy statement your button pusher makes. That's a full-time position. Pinocchio had Jiminy Cricket. But do you want to live on somebody's shoulder, whispering in their ear during their day? That's no life. So sometimes just kind of like let things go. But also when you have meaningful conversations, like we've got to talk about this. We've got to talk about the selfishness or the criticism or the control or the unfaithfulness or the manipulation. You do have to confront, but you don't have to confront every single time they say something. The next thing is, and this is going to be very difficult, preserve your button pusher's freedom. You need to be an advocate and like a total supporter of freedom for your button pusher. Now that sounds crazy. What are you talking about? They need to be in jail, in the bowels of the earth. And some people do. God bless prisons. I don't see anything wrong with prisons. However, if you are trying to control or nag or change or force your button pusher to be a different person, they are going to react against that, either in a covert, passive way or in a direct, forget you way and rebel. You know why? Because God grew people up, or God created people to grow up, to outgrow the parent position. The Bible says in Genesis chapter 2 that people grow up and then they leave and they do what? They cleave. And they cleave to a spouse or a support system or whatever. But they cleave outside the parental paradigm. And for you to come in and take away their freedom and say, you can't do that to me anymore, or you can't do this, or, I'm going to change this, what they're feeling is a parent. And being created to leave parents, first thing they're going to do is say, forget it. So you need to change your stance from you can't do crazy making things to you do a lot of crazy making things, and I want to talk about them, and I want you to change them, but you're going to have to stop yourself. Because I know that I have no power to change your insides nor your outsides. Now, having said that, I can do a lot of things to protect myself. I may need to. I may need to go out of the room. I may need to go to another, house. I may need to call the SWAT team. Whatever. I may need to take care of, me and my heart and my assets and my resources and kids or whatever. But when it comes push to shove, I am for your freedom. Some of you are going to need to tell your button pusher, I've been really trying to nag you into sanctification, and I'm sorry. I've been trying to, in every way, put books on your coffee table and tapes, in your car, and, I think you're getting sick of all this, and, I've just never seen any button pusher change because someone took away their freedom, okay? So be for their freedom. Be on top of their freedom. Be a person that says, I want you to freely change because you think it's the right thing to do, not because I made you change. Think how gross it would be if somebody changed because you made them do it. Because what does that tell you? If I stop making them do it, now what? They're not going to do it. And the only reason they changed wasn't because of the attachment. The only reason they changed wasn't because they felt things for me, because they valued the love that I want to develop. They just changed because somebody's got a gun to their head. And that's no way to develop a relationship. So remember your stance. And I want kind of you to have the freedom in your head to be thinking, okay, where could I be off balance? Am I like Scott? Am I like the nicest person in the world and I turn into Godzilla? Do I have that little split? Or am I just always so sweet and supportive and kind they never hear the truth? And so nobody tells them the truth. Or am I kind of like the nagger from the pit and always trying to show them the better way, and they feel like this kid being pounced upon? And give them freedom, be strict, and be an integrated person. Actually, you know what this means? It means getting to the growth process. It's very hard to have a very, very healthy stance with someone until you're in the growth process. Because otherwise, you've got your own fragmented parts. You've got your own immaturities. You've got your own past issues, and they're going to come into play. Why? Because the button pusher can hook you, right? Can't your button pusher make you crazier than you ever thought you were? Can't they bring craziness out of you that you had no idea was still there? Like, boy, I need meds that I never thought I needed because you're around that person. They can elicit those things from you because they're so deeply involved with you. But if you get in the growth process, that's why we talk so much here about small groups, and we talk so much about being around people who love you and draw you out and deeper issues. That's what's going to give you the stance, the healthy stance that you need. Okay, now your words. After we've got the point of view down, the words you use are important. And they're going to be, for most of us, kind of the number one thing that changes your button pusher, that you can do to change, besides the work of God and the circumstances and all that. What is it about words that are so important? Some of you may say, well, they don't do any good with my person. It's like talking to a glass wall. But you know what helps to see how powerful words are? Because I really want you to be encouraged by what you can do with your words that you haven't done. Think for a second, let's switch it around, about things that people have told you that changed your life. Maybe a confrontation you needed to hear, or maybe something good that you never knew. Think back for just a second in the last, 5 years. Something special that someone said that has never left you. I can think of 2 or 3 that really have been guiding posts for my life. Name something. Some phrase, some observation the person had to you, some correction, some encouragement that you kind of held on to that changed you. Yeah. One person can change your relationship. What's that, 5 or 6 words? And that can change the whole nature of your relationship. What else? Little phrases like that. You're better than that. For some reason, why are you allowing yourself to be, either treated the way you are, or why are you allowing yourself to, expect less of you than you're capable of? Well, the point is, words do matter. And some of us feel so, there's a very common experience of being around a button pusher. You feel like helpless and like you're talking to a glass wall and they're shutting you off and they've got the bad body language so they're not listening to you. And you start thinking, why should I say anything? Well, don't give up yet. In Ephesians chapter 4, the Bible says that we're supposed to speak to each other in love and truth, speaking the truth in love. And that really, you know what I think of the power of words is that words, I mean, if you think in terms of philosophy, words are representation. Words have no power in themselves. They're just sounds, right? But words are representation of love and reality. Words are like a dollar bill. You know, if you got a dollar bill, that's worth nothing. But it's based on, well, depending on how secure you feel about that, it's based on the finances of the American government. But words, you know, gold's got value. Dollars have no value, but dollars represent gold, or are supposed to. Words have no value in themselves, but they represent things and bring things to face and to bear in a relationship, mainly in terms of love, of what you feel towards someone, what you want from them, what you appeal to, and in terms of reality. This is something I won't tolerate anymore. I've been letting this go. This is a problem for me. I don't want this anymore. I'm going to have to change some things. And basically, your button pusher is going to be moved and changed by some combination, depending on that person, some formula of a certain type and amount of love that comes through your words, and a certain certain type and amount of reality that comes through your words. You know, like the old carrot and the whip. There's got to be some way you're conveying how you feel in a positive way to that person at the same time that there's some problems that need to be dealt with and looked at and addressed. The reason I mention that is because I think sometimes that balance of love and truth that we do in our words, that we present in our words, there's kind of in our culture something that Henry and I have noticed for many years now, that we tend towards, we're a little bit afraid of truth, basically. There's kind of a affirmation-only mentality that all people need is to be built up, which they do, and shown good things about themselves, which they have, and shown a better way and all this. And we're supposed to kind of stay away from confronting issues. And that's a problem. Because character issues, you know, growth issues, irresponsibility issues, unreliability issues, people who can be selfish or controlling or whatever, those never change with simple positive affirmations. There's generally some resistance or negative part inside that you've got to take kind of a wrecking ball to, in a loving, kind way, wrecking ball. But nobody like that who has a character issue ever got affirmed into health. And be aware of that. You know, sometimes it's because you know, I can understand the motives. Because some people just want to affirm only because they don't want somebody to be beat up, or maybe I see this happen a lot. Someone who's been beat up a lot, maybe in other situations, other relationships, they've been so hurt by criticism and control and judgment that they project the unworked through issues that they've never been able to face yet onto everybody in their life, creating a fragile person in their other person. Follow that?